And we all have a known or unknown, conscious or unconscious dream of holding or beholding the Christ child in our arms. This dear, dear baby that holds the hope of the world in his incarnation. And it is in this longing to hold him that we actually become more like him and become more able to share that hope with the world. If you are a visitor with us today, we're so glad you're worshiping with us. And you might not know that our community has had a challenging time recently. If you're a member of a church elsewhere, I'm sure that you can think of a few bumps you've had in your own church's road, and we'll be able to relate to what we're talking about. Because churches are human institutions, and as such, all of the foibles we humans express are present in all of our institutions. I hope you will find these comments helpful as you reflect upon the difficult periods you may have experienced in your own church life, and that you will add us, Kihei Lutheran Church, to your prayers. We have lost a pastor under difficult circumstances. We have been dealt a blow. We have experienced a loss. We have had and are having all of the normal emotions of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, apathy. We are a community longing for wholeness and healing. We are a community longing to hold and welcome the Christ child in our very midst. And in order for us to realize the hope that the Christ child brings, we must find a way to empty our arms of the burdens and cleanse our heart of grievances when we have been hurt. That is hard to do. We often want to hold on to our hurts and feed our grievances and stack up resentments and polish a list of cherished wrongs. These are very human tendencies, but they harden our hearts and they close our ears to the voice of Spirit. We have healing work to do, and Advent is a time of preparation. So what better season to devote ourselves to healing? It is normal and human not to want to do this hard work. It's so much easier to blame someone else or stuff it beneath food or busyness or distraction. And it's important to know that we take this healing journey not for the benefit of someone else, but so each of us will have a more clear, more unclouded, untroubled heart that will allow us to more deeply receive the Christ child this Christmas season. Our gospel lesson from Matthew today gives us guidance about when we should make this kind of healing work a priority. It suggests that the time is now. This is not work to be put off. Grievances, especially within the church, seem to have a long shelf life. And if they are not attended to, these very grievances can choke off the lifeblood of a church and its members. As the gospel says, we have no idea when we will lose our chance to clear our heart. We don't know when things will change suddenly. We don't know when the hour will come. Two in a field, one will be taken, one not. Two grinding meal, one will continue. The other will not have another chance at healing. As the lesson says, we must keep awake and be ready. And in this case, keeping awake means keeping alert to what we carry that separates us from our ability to receive God's love that is always streaming forth. Now, as I was getting my thoughts together and reflecting on my own life experience, especially in the church, I realized that I had had a few grievances of my own that I've been carrying around about a church leader that I've been working on and I will be working on along with you. I'm happy to report that I'm actually feeling more free already just by taking the first step that I'm going to be sharing with you today. What I also realized is that several things make wounding by and in the name of the church or its leaders very difficult. On some level, we all want the church and especially its leaders to be Christ. This is called projection. I was reminded that that is not the function of the church. Christ can only be all of us acting together, not the actions of one person. We all have expectations of our spiritual leaders. We don't necessarily have to change those expectations, but we do have to live up to them ourselves. We also have to realize that any spiritual leader will not be able to live up to all the various expectations that we project onto them. As I began to do my work on my own grievances, I found that on my list of expectations from a spiritual leader, the very top thing is to be able to show care, concern, inclusion, and acceptance. These are must-haves for me to respect a spiritual leader. When I can say in a clear and neutral way, I don't respect that certain spiritual leader because I have not experienced care, concern, inclusion, or acceptance in my interactions with him. You could say that I've formed an opinion. When I feel personally hurt by the fact that I didn't experience those things, then I have a wound. So there's a difference between an opinion and a wound. This is generally true in most relationships, but especially relationships where there's a power difference. What makes hurt within the church especially difficult is the development of what's called a classic double bind. A double bind is like an unanswerable question or a no-win situation. It means that we're bound up by two conflicting beliefs, and wounds related to church leaders get tangled up because of our perceptions and projections about God and our leader. Now, if a manager at Safeway hurts my feelings by not being caring or concerned or inclusive or accepting, I have an opinion about that manager, and I may go out of my way to avoid that person. Here we don't have a lot of other options, so, I don't want to be relegated to the Times and Foodland all the time, but, I do have some options. But when my connection with God is the church, that is where the double bind enters, because to get away from a non-accepting church leader, I have to step back from the church. But when I step back from the church, I feel like I'm stepping back from God. Or when I stop trusting a spiritual leader, it feels like I have to stop trusting God. That's what the double bind is. It's about fit, and it's about our expectations. That's why it's so important that we attend to this healing, and this Advent is the perfect time. We'll be focusing on a process that will help us move from woundedness or resentment to openness, freedom, and peace. And any experience that's standing between you and receiving the Christ child, you can use this same process. It might work on a family situation related to a relationship at work or a hurt you've experienced in a church community. The process is hardy and adaptable. The process we'll be using to guide us toward healing is a hybrid of 3 healing systems that I've woven together because I found wisdom in each of them. The first one is Archbishop Desmond Tutu's work called The Fourfold Path of Healing, Reconciliation, and Forgiveness. And it was modeled on the truth and reconciliation process used for healing following apartheid. The second is the work of Angeles Arian, a cultural anthropologist. Hers is called the Fourfold Way. And the other system that will guide and inform our work is some of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. So these are the steps that we're going to be using. And I'm going to have Kate put these in the daily blurb that comes out, so you'll be able to refer back to them. So the first step is showing up, being present to yourself, telling your story, the truth as you experience it, without blame or judgment. The second step is naming the hurts that have been part of your experience, paying exquisite attention to what has heart and meaning for you. The third step is asking God to help you choose to release as much hurt in any moment as you can, based on your heartfelt desire for healing. And then what you do is you follow the instructions that are on every shampoo bottle. Lather, rinse, repeat, right? Do the work step by step again until you're free. And then the fourth week of Advent, we're going to talk about moving forward with renewed understanding, letting go of the outcomes that are beyond our control and focusing on receiving the blessing God has in store for our clean heart and our open arms. This week, we're going to talk briefly about showing up, being present with yourself, telling your story, the truth as you experience it, without blame or judgment. Showing up means bringing yourself to the work, being committed to freeing yourself from what's separating you from God's love, making time to listen to yourself, not getting caught up in the sale you missed on Black Friday or what you're searching for on Cyber Monday. It means being in your own breath, slowing down, stopping, breathing, noticing. It means noticing your own inner temperature when you think of the difficult experience that you've been through. What has become too hot inside? And also, what has become too cold and contracted? This means listening inside to your story, telling yourself about your hurt. And it's really essential that you listen to the way you're telling your story, because sometimes the way we tell our story just reinforces our grievances. And what we're really doing is just pumping up what's clouding our heart to begin with. That's why the teaching is telling your story without blame or judgment, reporting as clearly as you can your experience. This is part of why it was so powerful in South Africa, because it gave people a chance to tell what happened to them in their own words and the effects of the actions of others. We all get to have our own experience, and we will have the freedom to change our perceptions. Our gospel lesson reminds us that there is no time like now, the beginning of Advent, to begin this essential work of readying ourselves to receive the Christ child. For no one knows when the opportunity will pass us by. To begin our healing journey, I have an invitation for you, and I will make sure that Kate puts this invitation in the email as a reminder. This invitation is to write a letter to yourself, and really write it. Don't just think about writing it. It's a letter of telling your story. Write it in the first person. Sentences start with things like, I experienced, I wondered, I saw, I felt, when, blah, blah, blah. Tell your story and take the time to tell the whole story as you experienced it. Don't edit your story. No one is going to be reading your story but you. Here's how I began my letter. Dear Roxanne, I notice I'm still carrying some hurt from my interactions with a certain spiritual leader. My blood is not boiling anymore, but there is still some simmering going on. This is something that I can address and heal. When I think about my communications with him, I experience ... So to begin, sit and breathe. Notice what is bubbling up or what energy is calling to you in the moment. You might start your writing session with a prayer, asking the Holy One to help you move forward. You might imagine yourself in one place and the manger a great distance away from you. And imagine that your grievances, hurts, and resentments are stacked up between you and the manger. My friends, we can't go around them. We can't go over them. The way forward is through them. Now, those of you who know me, you know that I'm going to ask you next Sunday, with a show of hands, who has a letter at home written, not that you've thought about it. Because this letter is going to be the foundation that we're going to use for our healing journey the rest of Advent. So make a commitment to do this to yourself. You might want to have a box of tissue next to you. It is not easy. But my friends, as the gospel says, keep awake, keep aware, begin now. None of us knows when the day of the Lord is coming. We want to have our arms open to receive the Christ child and his gifts for us. Amen.